Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anand, and I'm the Director of Global Presales for our Developer Tools Division here at Infragistics. The topic of today's webinar is 3 enterprise mobility must-haves. So the goal of today's webinar is really to arm you, to give you enough information to deliver the most optimal enterprise mobility solution to your users. And we're going to do that today by focusing on 3 must-haves. So before we begin, I just want to mention how Q&A is going to work. As I go through the material today, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A box right within the GoToWebinar system. And after we get through the demo, we'll go through the Q&A. I'll also give you my contact information, so if we couldn't get one of your questions answered or something comes up later on, you can always see me. Okay, let's get started. Let's take a look at the agenda. So we're going to start by defining the problem space, basically looking at the challenges of enterprise mobility in today's marketplace, in today's modern enterprises. We'll then look at the solution. We'll talk about the 3 must-haves that any successful enterprise mobility solution needs to have. We'll then do a solution demo. When we walk through the solution demo, what I'm going to do is talk about our solution as well as generic solutions and other ways that you can accomplish the same thing. So again, for the solution portion, I'm going to be, just for full disclosure, I'm going to be using our solution called SharePoint Plus. Okay, but again, the principles will apply to just about any solution. Following that, we'll do Q&A. So let's begin. So today, if you talk to just about any leader in a large enterprise, you're going to hear 3 things bubble up to the top as far as challenges. So there's 3 general challenges that we're seeing a pattern with. The first thing is connecting a mobile workforce. So, so as we all know, today's workforce is global, it's mobile. And, this is something that's come up, relatively speaking, almost overnight as far as technology is concerned. And it's presented, a significant challenge for enterprises. Next, we have identifying insights and information. So as we all know, again, that we live in an information age. There's data being generated by any type of event. And there's just an ocean of data. And the whole point is we really need to understand how to derive useful insights from this pool and this world of information. Because if we don't, we're not going to have that competitive advantage, right? Our competition is definitely going to do that. And finally, secure mobile access and collaboration. Right? Finding a way to provide secure mobile access so your entire workforce can be productive all the time and collaborate. That's another major challenge that I'm sure everyone's come across. So let's talk about something that accelerated the impact of these challenges. BYOD. So bring your own device is a fairly new paradigm. I just want to take a few steps back before we talk about BYOD. And let's just go back, it's probably about a decade ago, or a little bit earlier than that. If you remember, IT was really running the show when it comes to mobility. So the typical situation, and this happened at the firms that I've worked at as well, is if you needed mobile access, you basically submit a request to IT, and IT would issue you a device that they selected as the standard for the company, right? You had no choice. So you get a BlackBerry or something of that nature. That's one scenario. Another thing is, if you walked in with, let's say, a pocket PC or iPhone, some other type of device, and you said that you wanted to be able to access your corporate information, you wanted to be able to work with it, the answer was just no. And we accepted it, right? We couldn't really do anything about it because that's what was accepted. But the paradigm has changed. So now, as IT professionals, this is something we have to support. This is something we have to stay head on. And what it's done is it's created a fast-moving train that's coming right at us. And as IT professionals, we often feel trapped. We're forced to react to things. A CEO comes in January 2nd, with his Christmas present, which is an iPad. He basically brings it in and says, hey, I want my email on this, or I want to access CRM, X, Y, and Z. And what we've been doing as a technical community is really handling these things as a one-off, right? So we'll get someone a client for email, and they'll be all set. Or we'll figure out a way, some third-party tool that they can access to CRM. All these one-offs, and they don't make a good solution. At the end of the day, we're not really serving our users, as well as we could be. So to really provide a proper solution, an enterprise mobility solution to our end users versus a one-off for one person or one group, what we really have to do is take a deep dive into our constituency, into the folks that we need to empower. We really need to understand how they work day in and day out. We need to ask those questions. We need to figure out what do they need to make their job, to be successful in their job. On a daily basis, we really need to dig in. So let's just take an example of a salesperson for this particular webinar. But of course, the principles will apply to any profession. So you can imagine a salesperson at a desk. But at the end of the day, while you have access to CRM, your documents, etc., that's not really how the salesperson works, right? A salesperson is out and about, or they're visiting customers, they're on planes, they're in airports. So what you really have to do is understand that a true enterprise mobility solution is really an extension of the office. It should be just a natural extension of the office. It shouldn't be a group of tools, widgets, and and apps that I have to use, that I have to string together to get to my information. So just think about it, right? Think about that particular user you're trying to empower, that salesperson. What does he need? So when he's out and about, he's going to need access to the catalog, right? You need your product catalog. So in this case, we're just taking a camera salesman. You also have to have pricing. Right? You're out and about talking to a customer. You have to have your product catalog, pricing, and you also have to have access to your CRM system, right? As you're going about your daily routine, you can't wait till you get back in the office to enter all that information into the system. And finally, you obviously need access to all of your corporate documents, right? You need access to NDAs, to your sales contracts, your purchase orders, etc. Any type of information that you're going to get at the office, you're going to have in that mobile extension. You're going to have in your enterprise mobility solution. And this is why, even though just about every enterprise out there, if you speak to them about an enterprise mobility solution, in one way or the other, they're going to say that they've implemented one. The issue with that is that when you talk to salespeople, and surveys have showed that salespeople feel that 90% of corporate collateral, such as marketing information, is absolutely useless to them. And the reason is because they can't either access it conveniently, or they're not sure if it's out of date, or they just don't have online access. They don't have connectivity when they need to access it. So the result, in the sales community, and I'm sure in many other professions that require mobility, is that sales folks reported that 71% of their time is spent on tasks other than their core tasks. So 75% of their time is spent on, finding these documents, trying to call someone to figure out how to connect to X, Y, Z resource. So 71% of your time taking away from earning the company revenue, right, pulling in sales. So that's quite alarming. That definitely sends a message that we need to do something, right? We need to change this. And this is where enterprise mobility comes in. Right? Enterprise mobility isn't handling one-off. Enterprise mobility, in in very simple terms, is empowering your users, right? Empowering your workforce to be able to be productive anytime, any place, online or offline. So anytime you hear that term, enterprise mobility, or someone at work asks you, what it means, just think about that. I feel like that's a very easy summary. So 32 points, and in my opinion, it really wraps up everything you need to know and all the main pillars of enterprise mobility, right? As long as you adhere to these main pillars, you're going to do well. But remember, to get to these pillars, we have to have the 3 must-haves. So at minimum, if you want to deploy a successful enterprise mobility solution, this is what you're going to need. Number 1, security. So I'm sure we've all been bitten or gotten slapped on a wrist for doing something that that was going to or violated IT security rules. And I'm sure we all know that if we're proposing or trying to implement a solution that's not secure or that has holes, it's going to be shut down immediately. But we all know how governance is, and we all know how IT thinks about security, and rightfully so, with everything going on in the news these days, right? It is of utter importance. So what we want to do is really understand what security means when it comes to enterprise mobility. Because remember, this is a different paradigm. It's a completely different paradigm. And a lot of times when you work with folks, even with your own IT folks, sometimes you're going to have to educate them about this, right? You can't expect that everyone is up to speed on this paradigm change. So again, when it comes to enterprise mobility, security, let's look at it in 2 ways. We're going to divide it in 2. Number 1, your corporate information systems. So we're talking about security when it comes to your CRM system, your file shares, let's say SharePoint, accessing any type of corporate resource that's on-premise or in the cloud, but at the end of the day, it's really tied to that corporation. It's your corporate information systems, right? That's one area that we have to cover. Now, the second area that we have to cover is the device, right? And those are the only two areas you have to be concerned about. You have your information systems that are locked down and secure in your firm, and then you have your mobile device that your end users are carrying, right? Those are the 2 pieces that we obviously have to worry about. So let's first tackle information security. So when you talk about your information systems, so I'm talking about email, again, I'm talking about CRM, what you want to do is you want to be sure that whatever solution you're crafting or you're proposing, you want to ensure that that solution is able to integrate with your corporate information systems. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that there are quite a few tools out there that can get to your information, but they require their own security setup. So for instance, let's say you have Acme Mobility Solution. In the Acme Mobility Solution, you have to create Acme users. And then on the server side in your office, you have to configure access to all of the Acme users. So again, what happens with this? Number 1, it's a maintenance nightmare, right? Number 2, usually from what I've seen, IT won't really support that because that's another system that they have to learn. And then we were just down with a very large client, we were visiting them, and when we were talking about solutions, we looked at a few homegrown solutions that they were looking at and a few third parties. And then they just told us straightforward, very frankly, there's no other folks we're looking at. We're just looking at you. We've done all our homework, and we just asked them, with it, the user interface, that's what we're known for. We always have a superior user experience. But they said, the gentleman that we were speaking to just said no. He said, quite frankly, it was that you were the only solution that smoothly integrated with our internal systems. And he said, I'm the person, so this is an IT gentleman in the firm. He said, I'm the person that's responsible for administering whatever solution this is. So it was really refreshing to know that I didn't have to do anything extra here. So what do I mean by this? How do we integrate? What you do is whatever security infrastructure is in place, such as LDAP or let's say Active Directory is in use. So Active Directory is in probably the majority of enterprises, at least Microsoft shops. So whatever you're using, whether it's Active Directory or something else, what you want to do is ensure that your enterprise mobility solution plugs in directly. It should integrate directly, which means that if you have a user on your corporate network named John Doe, with John Doe's credentials, that's the same credentials that he accesses his information when he's in the office, he should be able to use those same credentials to access information through your mobility solution. Right? Hope everyone gets that. It sounds pretty straightforward and pretty simple, but it can very easily get very complex if you start getting out of this paradigm and start using tools that have their own security built in and their own authentication, authorization. It's very tricky. Okay, so remember, we've talked about two sides of security. One is the information system, and the other is a device. So let's talk about the device now. When it comes to the device, we're going to talk about security or data security in terms of two aspects. One is data at rest, and the other is data in motion. And if you ever speak to anyone in security, in IT security, you're going to hear these terms a lot, in rest and in motion. So let me explain what they mean. Data at rest is persistent data, right? So this is data that's not in memory. It's not being passed across the wire. It's data that's persistent to the disk. Okay? So that's data at rest. The second thing is data at motion. So what's data in motion? That's when we're trying to communicate across the wire. Right? We might be sending some information from one app to another. So it's basically data that's either in the system memory or it's floating across the wire. It's data anywhere except for persistent to the disk. Right? So if you think about it, there are two very easy buckets that you could put any type of security issue, challenge, or element when it comes to a device. You can always categorize those into rest motion. So let's talk about info at rest first. So when you talk about data at rest, three things are very important. And again, when we talk about data at rest, we're talking about very specifically on a mobile device, right? Number one, encryption. Number two, containerization. And number three, the secure wipe. So let's go in order here. Encryption. I think everyone's pretty familiar with encryption. I think at this point we all face it every day. But what you need to know in terms of enterprise mobility is that every device has their own paradigm of encryption. Every device has its own way and its own encryption features. As an example, in iOS, you have a very core feature called data protection. And any app can leverage that iOS feature by calling it and passing it the data, right? And what iOS will do is it will encrypt all that data at the hardware level. So I'm giving you an example when it comes to iOS. Now, other operating systems, other mobile operating systems, don't have their own. So solutions have to implement their own. We do that all the time when we target operating systems that don't have the level of encryption that we're looking for or that's important to our customers. So again, when you look at a solution, if you're building it, ensure that you have encryption covered based on the requirements of your industry, your space, any compliance issues, et cetera, HIPAA, et cetera. So that's if you're building. If you are going to purchase or you're not going to do this portion of the solution, make sure you ask the vendor. What you want to do is ask what type of encryption is used. How is the encryption applied? So what I mean by how is it done by your third-party application? Or is it done by the operating system itself? Right? These are questions that are very important because it makes a difference. you don't always want to, in many cases, you're not going to want to rely on the vendor, right? You're not going to want to rely on a third-party tool to encrypt your data. You want to make sure that in addition to that, you also have an operating system that's capable of doing that, right? So that's encryption. Next is containerization. Very interesting word here. Here's what containerization is. It's in this new paradigm of mobile apps and mobile devices. What you have is a way to separate each application into a container, or you might think of it as a sandbox or a bucket. But what happens in that bucket is that all of the data and items specific to that app are stored in that app's bucket. And no one else can access that bucket. So I'll give you an example. You have Microsoft Word running on your device, right? And then you also have, let's say, Adobe Acrobat running. Now, on the iOS, when implemented properly, these apps, right, Microsoft Word would store all of its information. So that's all of your drafts, all of your files, etc., in that particular bucket, right? In the Microsoft Word bucket, that would have data, application data. It would also have your settings, any type of user information. But the whole point is, it's in that bucket, the Microsoft Word bucket, and now the Adobe Acrobat application cannot access that bucket, right? So that's another layer of security. What that does is it prevents malicious applications from accessing your application or your solution data and doing something malicious with it, right? That's containerization. And finally, the secure web. It's pretty straightforward. And what it is that whether you have a mobile device management solution, or you have, or you're using an operating system that has this built in, or even an application, what you want to make sure is that you have a way of securely wiping the memory or the memory space of a device that holds your corporate information. Very important. Now remember this, as we all know, information never really dies when you just delete it, right? Or when, let's say, another user signs in. That all of those types of ways of getting rid of data, that's not reliable. The only way you can reliably remove data, remove your corporate data off a device, is to have that memory space actually wiped, right? And that's a whole process that software systems are capable of doing. But why I'm bringing it up here is because it's absolutely important with the mobility solution. Devices are lost all the time. People forget to lock them. Employees leave, they separate for whatever reason from firms, and a lot of times we just don't have the luxury of ensuring that those devices are completely void of all of our critical data. So you always want to make sure that whatever solution you have in place adheres to a wipe policy. You want to make sure that it can actually satisfy that, and wherever it holds data can be wiped. Next, we'll talk about information in motion. So data in motion, this is very straightforward. When it comes to any type of communication layer, what you're going to always want to make sure is that you're using secure sockets, right? You're using SSL. Now, if you're going through if you're going to tunnel directly without an MDM and go through a VPN, you're going to want to make sure that your solution supports VPN, right? Some solutions support the VPN out of the box with the default device's VPN tool. Others don't. Another interesting point is the MDM tunnel. So if you don't know the acronym, MDMs are mobile device management solutions that large enterprises use to deploy and control devices, applications, and the information on them. So they basically secure or lock down a mobile deployment, let's say iPads or iPhones. And a lot of these, probably most of these MDM solutions have what they call a secure tunnel. Now, they all go by different names, but it's more or less a secure tunnel that connects your device all the way to the corporate network. And you want to make sure that the solution that you deploy, right, the enterprise solution, enterprise mobility solution that you deploy can enter that, can integrate with that tunnel. Because the majority of the solutions out there do not do that. So that's one of the questions you're going to ask. You're going to want to ask right at the beginning, right? You're going to want to handle that. If you're building the solution yourself, you're going to want to talk to your IT infrastructure folks, especially the folks in the mobility section. Find out what MDM they're using, if they are, and what their policies are. And again, you're going to want to make sure that your vendors in contact with them or your developers who are developing the solution, right? You want to make sure that that's very smooth. And finally, firewall rules. So it's just not enough to handle SSL, to handle VPN, or MDM tunnels. In large corporations, in just about every sector, more and more we're seeing other appliances that are in between the corporate network and the outside. So these are firewalls. These are other types of pieces of network equipment that are capable of examining who's coming in and ensuring that they're only being routed to the appropriate resources. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because to get enterprise mobility solutions to work, right, outside of the test environment, to actually work in production, you're going to have this challenge. You're going to have this challenge knocked out. What you'll often see is that when you get out of the corporate environment or out of your test environment, and you go to the field and start testing these solutions, they get blocked. They don't even make it across. Even though you're using SSL, you tackle the VPN, a lot of times what we don't understand is that there are firewalls in between, and you have to have a solution that can adhere or adjust to firewall rules. Last point on that is one example is the user agent. Okay? So let's say there's a particular firewall and we're guarding Acme Bank. The firewall is monitoring any traffic coming through Acme Bank. Well, one of the things that IT does with the firewall is that they block certain types of devices. So in one example, we had a client that only wanted Android to be able to connect. That was their corporate device. And they noticed that other people were bringing in some other devices, iOS, et cetera. They just wanted to block that out. They simply enabled a rule in their firewall that allowed only a particular, what's called a user agent, or type of device that's coming, or browser that's coming in, to actually get through. So keep that in mind, because if you have to adhere to firewall rules, you're going to need to ensure that your solution is able to adjust, maybe adjust the user agent name or something of that nature. Okay. Must-have number 2, offline access. So this is something that often bites all of us. We hear about it so many times when folks, when folks try to implement an enterprise mobility solution themselves, or they're trying to modify, tweak an existing solution. What they often forget is that offline functionality is very crucial. It's often make or break. We can't always assume that our users have connectivity. When we're in the test environment, when we're in the safe confines of our corporation and we're testing, our scenarios work perfectly, but we have to keep in mind that this is not the normal environment. You have to keep in mind that like we mentioned before, that folks are in airports, folks are in airplanes, they might not have go-go, they might be at customer sites, and at customer sites you can't always depend on connectivity. The last point I want to make about this is that, remember, an enterprise mobility solution really needs to be an extension of the office. That's really what it needs to be. You have to just think about it as a natural extension of that office, not a bunch of apps, not a couple of tools. It's an extension of your office. You have to enable people to work anytime, any place, and especially offline. Right? And last but not least, let's talk about must-have 3. Now, this is listed as number 3, but I have to say, this is absolutely critical. This is make or break, and you know what? I've been guilty in the past. I'm going to raise my hand and say I've probably been the most guilty of this, just missing out on how important UX is. Now, when we go to the demo, you're going to see that firsthand. But this is something that really has to be nailed, right? It's very easy, and we've seen so many times. I'll give you a great example. I had actually a friend of mine, he's now a customer, he's a friend of mine, and what he did is he was tasked to put together this mobility solution for his folks. And he said, oh, this is just a piece of cake. You know, they're using SharePoint. They already have SharePoint. They don't have all the information on there. But what he did is he started a migration project internally, and he had all the pricing information, critical CRM information, and all the corporate docs that weren't on SharePoint. He had them put on SharePoint, as well as the product images. So him and his team, they had everything lined up in SharePoint, right? And then all they did is they issued iPads. And what they had the end users do is access SharePoint from a web browser. Now just imagine this. We're talking about a natural extension of the Office. And this is what I get. So I don't know if any of you have had, I'll just say pleasure, of trying to access SharePoint from a mobile device with a browser. But in a nutshell, I just want to mention that it's not a pleasurable experience. It's not very usable, and anyone that you speak to who's had this experience, they'll talk your ear off about it. They'll give you enough feedback. If you just take a look at this visual, you'll see that this interface is really made for mouse clicking, right? So if you see that little arrow on the right, the little icon, it's very difficult with just a standard human finger to actually tap on the particular icon that you're looking for. And not only that, it just, look at this obviously wasn't designed to be an, to really be made as an extension of my Office. Just try to look at this and see how easy it is to find anything, the font, etc. It's just not a good experience, right? So when you're trying to craft an enterprise mobility solution, remember that it's not just important to make sure it's secure, make sure it works offline, to make sure that people actually have access to everything. You can't just say, you have access to X, Y, Z, we're done. It's really important to make sure that you tackle user experience. Why? If you don't, it's not going to be adopted. Your project will fail. Another reason why this is important is because these days, people are used to these great consumer software experiences. But it's not like back in the day when I first started out. I remember I was making an app for my manager and his constituents, and I actually saved that code. I looked at it maybe about 10 years back, and I cannot believe anyone used it. But people were so happy. It was the ugliest thing I've ever seen. It was just a gray screen. You could click one button and pull up some data. But long story short, it was the most unusable piece of software I've probably seen in my life. But when I deployed it, I was a hero. People loved it. Why? Because they could get their job done. They weren't used to better software. If I walked into that same company now, I get laughed out of the room because people are used to these great iOS, Android touch experience. That's the level that we're at now, right? That's where the bar is. The bar has been set, so now we have to hit it every time, right? So that's one of the things I want to bring across. I want to make sure that you all are successful at delivering these enterprise mobility solutions, and I want to make sure you really understand that UX is key. Because if you get that nailed, you're going to have happy users. You're going to have a very successful implementation. Let's start with a demo now. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to demo our solution for enterprise mobility, which is called Share Plus. One second here, I'm having some issues sharing my app. Okay, so you should be looking at you should be able to see my iPad screen right now. I'm going to start out by showing you Share Plus. going to give you just a very broad overview, and then I'm going to actually pinpoint and hit those 3 must-haves and talk about how those 3 must-haves actually manifest in this solution. So again, we'll start with just a brief overview so you understand what you're looking at, and then I'm going to hit those 3 must-haves. SharePlus is a native iOS application that allows you to connect to SharePoint and fully manage all of your resources. So that means you can connect to SharePoint from a mobile device securely. You can check in, check out, you can edit, you can look at your calendar, you can find documents, you can add documents, you can collaborate with users on posts, etc. Right? So that's what SharePlus is in a nutshell. You can think of it as a mobile extension of SharePoint in a nutshell. Right? So let me just walk you through what the solution does, and then we're going to jump into those 3 must-haves. On the left-hand side, you have your navigation bar. I'm logged in as the user Gartfort, so you can see Gartfort listed there under social. If I tap social, I can get to all of the SharePoint 2013 social features. Below that, we see search. So with search, I can just type in any term here, and a server-side search will be performed. Any document that has that term in it will be pulled up in a matter of seconds. That's search. And we've got sites to connect to as well, most importantly. So with SharePlus, what you do is you basically connect to a site by configuring it. To configure a site, you basically just tap the Add button, type in a nickname for the site, and the exact same URL that you type in a browser, put in your credentials, and you're all set. So that's how we get a site added. Right? And once the site's added, all you do is just tap it like so. So I tap into a site, and now I can explore the libraries. You can say I've got documents. I go down below, I can see lists. And in case you folks weren't aware, with SharePoint, you can not only access your physical documents and SharePoint items, but you can also link other corporate data systems to SharePoint, such as SQL Server and other things. So if you look below, you can see lists. And I have sales data, I've got some other information coming through that I have access to. So I'm not going to spend too much time really demonstrating this product or the whole solution. I really want to hit those key 3 main must-haves. So I'm just going to finish the overview of the SharePlus solution by just showing you how to pull up a document. I just tap Documents to go to that library. I'm going to tap Sales. Right, I'm basically executing a use case of an average salesperson. I opened up SharePlus, I went to a site, and now I'm opening my document called Pricing Guidelines. Right? Pretty straightforward. Okay, so this is a very robust enterprise mobility solution. Now, let's look at this solution in terms of the 3 must-haves that we listed. And let's talk about how how they manifest. So the first thing that we spoke about was security. And again, when we talked about security, we talked about it in 2 different categories. The first one was information systems, right? That's on-premise. All of our email, network files, documents, etc. Information systems. The second thing was device. So let's talk about the information systems first and how we handle that. I tapped on Site, and what I'm going to do is tap on Edit on the right. I'm just going to go ahead and tap on that demo site. And if you look below the name and the URL, you'll see authentication. So under Mode, I'm just going to tap that, and you can see that we can use Windows, Forms, Web Login, Office 365. So whether you're using form-based, Windows-based, etc., the key point here is that we have methods to integrate directly with your internal security infrastructure. So when I connect, I'm basically using my Windows credentials. So again, going back to natural extension of the office. These are the exact same credentials that I use when I'm on site, right? When I'm in the office, the exact same credentials. So why is this important? Again, remember, everyone. Now, I don't have to have training for administrators at my company so they can figure out how they can administer security here, how they can add accounts, how they can remove accounts, how they can dictate the system who has access to what. Those folks don't have to do that in my company because it's already set up. We just plug directly into the existing authentication and authorization. So remember, not just authentication, but authorization is important too. So the difference is authentication is who you are. You know, who is this person? Right? But authentication says who you are. Authorization says what you have rights to access. So I just showed you how we handle authentication. Let's talk about authorization now. So now I'm tapping demo, and I'm going to browse to a site. I went to the library. So as I'm going through this, what's happening on the back end that you're not seeing is that all of the calls, all of the code that's firing on the back end when it's talking to the back end SharePoint server, everything that's happening is being done under my user context. Very important. It's done not under some Share Plus admin's context. It's done under the context of Guard4. That's who I'm logged in as. So what it means is that we're only going to return data that that user, Guard4, is allowed to access, right? So authorization has already been set up. Now, just about every company will already have this set up. So if you're using SharePoint, it's already set up, right? You can already dictate who has access to what. So now when you use a solution like an enterprise mobility solution like Share Plus, it's done. It just naturally connects. You don't have to do anything differently for authentication. You don't have to do anything differently for authorization. It just works out of the box. Okay. So we spoke about security in terms of the information systems, authentication and authorization. Now let's look at it on the device level. So again, remember, when it comes to the device level, we were talking about encryption, right? We were talking about the secure wipe. So let's just think about this for a minute. Let's take each piece one by one. First of all, encryption. Here's how encryption is handled. With Share Plus, what we do is we plug into the iOS data protection API that I mentioned earlier when I talked about security. And all of this application data, whether it's your corporate documents or it's your user setting information or any other type of cached information, all that information is going to be encrypted by iOS data protection. Now, on top of that, we're also able to add our own layer. And when that's required, we can add that. But the whole point is encryption is taken care of at the persistence layer here in two ways. One, by iOS. The second is by our own encryption layer that we can add. Which leads us into containerization. So we talked about encryption. Now all this data is encrypted, but where is it stored? Well, it's stored in the private Share Plus container. So if you look at my screen here, my iPad, you can see that I've got many apps. But the Share Plus information is stored in its own rock-solid container that none of these other applications can access. So even if an employee accidentally installed some malicious app that was capable of taking information from other apps, it wouldn't be able to do it with Share Plus because the information is encrypted and in its container. Now let's talk about the wipe. Again, probably one of the most important security aspects, and let's talk about how that is implemented with Share Plus. First thing, when you're using an MDM, Share Plus complies universally with the wipe. So it doesn't matter what MDM solution you're using, what brand, what vendor you go with. When they follow that MDM standard and they issue that wipe command. So again, let's say the use case is an employee got terminated, they didn't turn in their iPad. Now you, from IT, want to ensure that that's wiped. You can issue a wipe command from any MDM solution, and SharePlus will comply with that. All the data that SharePlus contained would not just be deleted, it would be permanently wiped, and there'd be absolutely no way for that to be retrieved from that device. Okay. I just opened up settings, and I want to show you the passcode lock option. So I'm showing you this from an end user's perspective, but this can be done from an admin's perspective as well. So you as an admin or as a solution architect can actually dictate and mandate that a solution passcode or an application passcode must be used. And what's really nice about this is that you can also mandate another rule. You can implement a rule that says that after X amount, so let's say after 10 amount of retries, if they can't get their passcode in properly, the system's wiped. So that's how security is handled at a very high level with SharePlus. Next, let's talk about offline access. Well, SharePlus makes it very easy. It couldn't be any easier to set up your users for offline access. So I'm going to show you how to do this from an end user's perspective. But just understand that from an admin's perspective, you can very easily, with just flipping a few switches, you can enable this for all of your users. To enable anything to be made available for offline access, you simply tap on any item. So again, I just connected to our location pictures in one of our sites here. I'm going to tap on an item, and you can see here at the top, keep offline. If I toggle that, anytime I'm offline, I'll always have access to that picture. So I might even be in an airplane. If I'm cut off from connectivity, SharePlus will give it to me still. Probably a better use of that is handling offline connectivity at the library level. We can do that as well. So in this case, what I'm saying is I've done a long tap on documents, and I'm going to say that anything in this library needs to be made available for me offline. So I can just hit Edit Settings and toggle that. And you see that I've already done that. And that's why, now remember, I'm online. So if I need to get to my sales documents, not a problem, right? This is very easy to get to. But let me go offline. So if you look at the toggle switch on the left, you'll see online on the bottom. I'm just going to toggle that off. So I'm now offline. So for all practical purposes, I don't have to have any type of connectivity. But now, if you see, I can still go to my site, tap on Demo, and remember, I made the Documents library available offline. So I can tap on that, right? And I can get to all my documents. This is the same document that we pulled up before online. You can see it's just the same. All right, so I'm going to finish offline access with that. We could go into more details, and if you'd like to learn more, please go to our website or email me directly. I'll be happy to explain all of the more detailed or advanced features. But now what I want to do, we have just about 12 minutes left. I want to go into user experience. And again, like I mentioned, I believe that this is the most critical aspect, the most critical must-have of your solution. I can't stress this anymore. So let's jump into this. Let's do this. Let's think about this in terms of a use case. Let's go back to the salesperson, and let's think about this in terms of a day in the life of a salesperson. If I'm a salesperson, like I mentioned before, I have to access contacts, product information, key account folders, documents, etc. So let's start. When you talk about this in a UI perspective, let's take a look at it. You really have to put yourself in the user's perspective, right in the user's shoes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Safari, and like I mentioned before, I'm going to talk about the solution that
many folks, including a good friend of mine, tried to put together. And it's basically giving your folks an iPad like so, and telling them, hey, you have access to everything. Go get it. So imagine I'm a salesperson now, and I've got to quickly pull up, my customer asked for the latest model of a particular camera that they're interested in. I've got to dig it up now. Just imagine this. Just look at the links, and I'm going to try to hit share documents on the left. Oops, accidentally. Okay, hold on. So I'm just tapping, but as you can see, it's very tough to tap these links. They're very tiny. And I got to share documents, and once I'm in there, it's still very difficult to, okay, there we go. Wow, it's the first time I got it the first try. I was able to hit that drop down. But you can see this is very frustrating, right? Let's say I'm trying to get to my contacts. I didn't need to make a quick phone call. I got to figure out, where do I get the contacts here? Is it in a list? Is it in a library? And remember, I'm a salesperson, right? I'm not an IT professional. You have to put yourself in their situation. I don't know what a library is. What's a SharePoint library? What's a list? So I'm just looking around here, trying to find my contacts. Oh, there we go. Okay, good. I just hit it. Contacts. Let me just think about that scenario. Just think about, is that the user experience that you want to give folks? And not only that, if I wanted to access anything offline, I couldn't, because I need a live connection to get my browser to talk to SharePoint, right? So I'm basically out of luck. Again, I don't want to keep going through the scenarios, but it's very cumbersome. Let's say I'm trying to get to my Jackson Mutual purchase order. Let's say a key account folder I'm just trying to get to really quickly. Very, it's challenging to try to figure out where something is, even if I go there all the time, right? So this creates a significant productivity issue, and we've heard this several times. So now let's talk about that well-crafted, that optimized user experience that you can deliver to really get that wow factor. How are you going to get that wow factor? Well, you're going to get that wow factor from two things. Number one, I'm going to say three things actually. Number one, giving something or providing a simple application, right? Number one, simple. Number two, it should be absolutely, and positively available completely offline. It means you shouldn't have certain pieces that you can access online, certain pieces offline. The whole thing should work or not work, online or offline, period. Right? So number one, you have usability. Number two, you have offline access. But what's really important, I think, to really get adoption, other than just wow and that offline ability, is productivity. You've got to be able to make their life easier. You've got to be able to go to your user and have them see a task that used to take X amount of steps, and you simplify that with 2 steps, and you give it to them with a wow factor. That's going to change their lives. So let's do that right now. So just think about that old scenario, and now let's look at the well-crafted solution that we're going to deploy. So remember, we're dealing with salespeople, so we're going to take our time to really understand the way they work, what they need to do, what they need to access. Right? We're going to do all of our due diligence, and what we're going to do is present not a group of tools, not a group of apps, not a group of widgets, or documents or lists of instructions that they can follow to get to their information. We're going to provide them a natural extension of their office. Here's how we do it. So what I'm going to show you now is Share Plus with a custom interface that you can do yourself. It's very easy to craft a custom interface with Share Plus that specifically targets your customers. Specifically. So I'm a salesperson. Look at my experience now. Let's say I need to get to a purchase order, let's say for Jackson Mutual with my customers. Let's see how easy it is now. I just opened Share Plus. Let's count the taps. Well, now I can see where my key account folders are, just to the left. One tap, I tap on the green. And with just one tap, and imagine, I might be online, I might be offline, it doesn't matter. one tap, and I see it right here, 2 taps. So with 2 taps, I can get to just about anything I need. So look at how easy that was. I don't even have to know about SharePoint. I don't even have to know what a list is. I don't have to know what a library is. I don't have to know what a SharePoint item is. I'm a salesperson, right? All I want to do is get to my folder, get to my document. Next thing, let's say contacts. I need to get to my contacts. I don't want to have to know what site it's in, what list it's in. Is it a library? No, I just want to press a button. So let me just tap this button, Contacts, in the top right. That's all I want to do. And you can see as you're going through this, and what you're doing is you're not just providing a mobile solution. What you're doing is you're completely changing the way they work, right? You're completely improving their productivity. And I can't tell you the amount of impact that that's going to make. When you deploy a solution like this to a group of users that are used to going the other way, it'll be so satisfying to you. It'll blow your mind. This is what I'm really passionate about. It really makes me get up every day. I just love seeing our customers' faces when they look at the solutions that we've crafted for them. And I want you guys to see the same thing. I really want you all to experience that same thing. So we could go through some more on UX, on user experience, but I think we've got about 5 minutes left. So I want to leave that open for questions. Just give me a second here to get to the Q&A box. Okay, I see a question from John. John, if you're still on, could you please resubmit the question? It looks like it got cut off. Okay, I'm going to go to another question with John. For John. What native operating systems does SharePlus run on? Okay, good question. SharePlus runs on iOS. When I say iOS, I mean that we cover iPad minis, iPads, and iPhones. And it also runs on Android. So those are the 2 native platforms that we support. Hope to answer your question. Let me go to the next one. Next question. Are you going to do a demo of Report Plus? Actually, that's a great question. And I didn't have that planned. But if you ping me, what I'll do is I can go through a separate walkthrough of Report Plus for you. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Report Plus, that's what the question was about. Report Plus is another element in our enterprise mobility platform. So Infragistics Enterprise Mobility Platform consists of 2 core pieces. One is SharePlus, which you're looking at right now, and the other one is Report Plus. So I won't do a whole demo of Report Plus, but I'm just going to quickly pull it up so everyone has an idea. What Report Plus is it's the data piece. Report Plus allows you to connect to virtually any corporate data source and create rich visualizations without writing any code. So I'm just going to, let me just open up a quick dashboard. This is a Report Plus dashboard, and like every single Report Plus dashboard, it was built without writing one line of code. So all you have to do is identify your data sources, whether it's SQL Server, Oracle, Excel, SharePoint. Like I said, we can connect to any corporate, any standard enterprise corporate data store. And you basically drag and drop, pick your visualization, and you can craft these stunning dashboards. So these dashboards allow you to drill down, they allow you to filter. At the end of the day, it allows you to extract real actionable data from your corporate information in real time. So again, this is all in real time. This can also be used offline. This integrates directly with our enterprise mobility solution. So again, this integrates directly in SharePlus. Okay, 1 second. I think someone's trying to fix. Okay. If Robert's there, do you think you could resubmit your question? That one got cut off too. Next question, can you provide contact info? Yes. I will do that right after the Q&A. Next question, what about collaboration? Is it SharePoint or Share Plus functionality that controls the number of users who can work on a file at one time? What collaboration features are there? This is from John. Well, John, we fully integrate with SharePoint. So all of the checkout, check-in versioning, that's all handled by SharePoint, and we connect natively. So we connect natively to those SharePoint APIs to get that done. Right? So again, that type of functionality is not handled by us. It's handled by SharePoint. Do you have a plan on building a Windows phone for SharePlus? We are speaking about that. We don't have anything that's concrete on the roadmap yet. Okay, next question. Talking about SharePlus and user experience, is it possible to automatically push some sites to devices? So let me stop there. There's more to the question, but the answer is yes. So with SharePlus, from an admin's perspective, what you can do is you can create all the settings for your end users and just push them out. So if your end users need to connect to sites A, B, and C, they don't have to memorize the URLs. They don't even have to add them. From an admin's perspective, you can do that. You can set it up for them. Next part of the question, in your demo, the user has to manually enter the URL of the SharePoint site. I was wondering if there's a way to publish, so I think I answered that question. Yes. The answer is yes. You can do that centrally, and you can do that either using an NDM, or you can also do that using our central configuration if you don't have an NDM in place. How does SharePlus handle conflicts? Check in, check out. Okay, so let me paraphrase this question. So a conflict is a scenario where one user has a cached copy of a document. Let's say at 12 o'clock noon, this particular user lost connectivity. So they have a cached copy of a finance document. And now they plan to use it on a plane. So before they use it, another user, let's say Fred, checks out that document, adds something to it, and checks it in. Now the original user who cached that at noon, at 1 o'clock, they make some changes, and now they have connectivity. They go to check it back in. So I think what the question is how do we handle that? Well, we have a feature called conflict resolution. And what that'll do is that'll detect that conflict has happened, and it'll present the user with options on how to resolve that. And it's basically the same functionality that you have in the desktop, so you don't lose anything there. Let me pull up my contact information here. So for those of you who asked my contact information, here it is. Let's just see if more questions trickle through. Oh, there was one earlier. How do you customize the UI? Okay, so the custom user interface that I was showing you with the sales demo, that's called Rubicon, that was written in HTML and CSS. So there's a couple of ways. There are 3 ways that you can create custom interfaces with SharePlus. And we call these launch pads, just so you know the terminology if you're ever looking at our documentation. The first way is by a Report Plus dashboard. And I'm not going in order. So the Report Plus dashboard, like any of the ones that I showed you today, that can actually be used as kind of like a landing page or a starting page, or the home page in SharePlus. Another thing that you could do is use a PDF or Word document. Any Microsoft Office document can be used. But of course, those are the most popular picks. The most popular picks are those custom screens, like the one I showed you with sales. That one was created using HTML and JavaScript and CSS. And it's just standard HTML, standard JavaScript, standard CSS. On top of that, what we do is we provide an easy API for you. So if you want to read and write information from SharePoint, you can do that using our simplified JavaScript API. So you don't have to figure out in JavaScript how to authenticate to SharePoint, how to marshal or push information back and forth. We take care of all that for you. Hope that answered the question. Okay, guys, we're just about out of time. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to email me. You can email me at this email address here, araja@infragistics.com, and you can also hit me up on Twitter. Hope everyone enjoyed this webinar, and I hope that you're very successful at deploying enterprise mobility solutions that are going to amaze your folks. Thanks, guys.